My name is Barbara Pasternak. I'm founder and chair of Diabetes Hope Foundation.
And I am Alexx, and Barbara and I will be your wonderful hosts while we lead this amazing webinar tonight.
So this evening, before we begin, we would like to welcome Dr. Michael Vallis, PhD registered psychologist,
and 5 wonderful alumni from various years of receiving their scholarship. Tonight, they will be talking and sharing their insights on diabetes management, as well as their insights and expertise on managing their diabetes on top of having an additional health condition, such as celiac, seizures, learning disorders, nut allergies, ADHD, anxiety, and cystic fibrosis.
To address these very complex topics mixed in with having diabetes, we would like to welcome, as I mentioned, Dr. Michael Vallis. Dr. Vallis is a registered health psychologist who's based in Halifax, Canada. He's a health behavior change consultant and associate professor in the family medicine at Dalhousie University. His main area of expertise is adult health psychology with an emphasis on obesity, diabetes, cardiovascular risk, and gastroenteritis. And how amazing that he recently was awarded the Queen's Diamond Jubilee Medal by the Government of Canada on the recommendations of Diabetes Canada. What an amazing honor, and we warmly welcome Dr. Vallis.
So Barbara, I guess we'll move on and we'll introduce our speakers and then we'll let them ask their questions. Kai, do you want to give a brief introduction about yourself?
Hi there. So I'm on Vancouver Island. I'm actually in my office. I'm a clinical social worker, which is a boring title for a fun job because I just meet with awesome humans all day of all ages and diverse backgrounds, from kids to older. And so I live with diabetes and ADHD.
Very interesting. Thank you, Kai. Kristin.
So hi, I'm Kristin. I'm currently coming to you from York Region, specifically Vaughan. I had 95% of my pancreas removed when I was only 3 years old due to hyperinsulinism, seizures, and hypoglycemia. And as part of also developing diabetes, I got such things as not being able to read my symptoms, learning disorder, nut allergy, and a reactive anxiety disorder. And I currently work with the York Region District School Board as a child and youth worker, working with kids with special needs, currently working from home.
Thank you for sharing. And Allie.
Hi, my name is Allie. I work with the Diabetes Hope Foundation. I've been working with them since 2013 when I received my scholarship. I'm from Ottawa. I'm 25 years old now. I live with cystic fibrosis and cystic fibrosis-related diabetes. My educational background is communication studies and psychology, as well as a postgrad in brand management.
Awesome. So fascinating as well. And Janet.
Hi, I'm Janet, also coming to you from Ottawa. I am a scientific project coordinator for Health Canada. I've been living with type 1 diabetes for 25 years, so I was diagnosed when I was 18 months old. And I also have been living with celiac disease for the past 3.5 years.
And finally, Logan.
Hi, I'm Logan. I've been diabetic for 7 years now, and I was diagnosed with celiac disease about a week after I got diagnosed with type 1, so that was another learning curve all at the same time. I'm a DHF scholarship recipient this year, so that's really exciting, and I'm going into my first year of nursing school this year.
So lots already on the go. Panelists, I'm looking at you all. Because Dr. Vallis shared so much interesting information, like I said, I'm sure all of you have some burning questions. Kai, I'm going to start with you. Do you have anything that you want to ask specifically to Dr. Vallis?
This is super useful for me, all this information, because I work with a lot of people that are struggling with this. So I love this, and being a human myself in my work, right? That we're all humans trying to help each other. So to help myself and others, I was just curious. It's pretty general, but if there's anything that's come up in literature or research or just through practice about, the interesting nuances of living with ADHD and managing diabetes.
Yeah, so one of the really interesting things about I think where we are now, and it's I've been taking to call it the following: when behavior meets biology. So we're beginning to develop a better understanding of what's actually underlying from a brain function and structure perspective the behavioral challenges. And so I'm hoping that what that will do is allow us to really figure out how to take a bit more of a compassionate approach. And so the reason for that would be, Kai, something like ADHD. So when you look at what's going on with ADHD, it sort of looks like what's happening is in that sort of frontal lobe executive systems. And so things are, the ability to sort of stay focused and sort of track, sort of working memory, and working memory would basically be, okay, you're kind of, you're organizing, your files. Somebody distracts you and says, oh, can you come here for a minute? You go, and then you say, what was I doing? And, can you actually remember that, 45 seconds ago, you were actually working on your files? That's kind of, you have to hold everything kind of in this working memory. And with ADHD, that shifts a little bit. And where this is going is it's really helping us look at this in terms of then reframing how we help people. Because unfortunately, Kai, the relationship between the patient and the provider has always been like this. And sometimes you might have heard this. Doctors will say, I've got lots of patients who are able to do this. So if they can do it, you can do it. And that just completely invalidates individual differences and biological variabilities. And so as we start to understand, okay, hang on a second, that's not fair. You can't just ask one. And the way I put it this way is as follows, because this, by the way, is true. It is possible for someone to run a marathon in 2 hours, 1 minute, and 34 seconds. That's the world record. But that doesn't mean that everybody should be able to run a marathon in 2 hours, 1 minute, and 34 seconds. As a matter of fact, only one person has done it. But we have a tendency to think, well, if it's possible, then it should be possible for you. So one of the things that I'm hoping we'll be able to do is we kind of start to look at what are the limits of behavior. So when you have cystic fibrosis, what does that mean? When you have celiac disease, and you heard about gastroenterology, that's the sort of GI conditions. And so that's where we would see the celiac patients. So Janet, to be diagnosed with celiac, I'm sure you've seen a gastroenterologist. They were probably the doctor who diagnosed the celiac disease. But just imagine, the celiac disease sort of loves food that diabetes hates. It's a nightmare because the foods that make your gut feel okay are not necessarily the foods that sort of do well in terms of blood glucose. And sometimes it's kind of the absolute opposite. So it really provides kind of challenges. So for me, it's validating the limits of behavior, which then allows us to say, okay, given the fact, right? So what ends up happening is doctors kind of say, well, if only you got to try harder, right? Because this is the guideline. This is what you need to do. And we want to understand behavior such that we can shift, if only you could do this, to given that you have X, Y, or Z, what is the next plan? And it's that shared problem solving. The other new thing that's happening, and I think I'm hoping it's related to COVID, and that is because we're starting to understand that COVID is going to have an incredible mental health impact, that many people we're starting to see COVID more as a traumatic stress than just sort of a stressful life event. And so that's really putting increasing the sensitivity to mental health issues. So I've been invited to do a keynote presentation at Diabetes Canada meetings in the fall on diabetes and mental health, just because the group are saying we got to know more about mental health because we expect this. So ironically, this kind of negative pandemic event might actually increase our ability to support the journey. So I hope that was helpful, Kai.
Thank you. That was wonderful, Dr. Vallis. Just a segue into what you just talked about, COVID, mental health. Change can be very hard, and as most people know, especially those who don't have diabetes, find it probably more difficult. With modern society, and sometimes encourages unhealthy behavior. Example, wanting to get fast foods when you have a long and stressful day. What are some of the strategies or solutions to help avoid this, to pull from unhealthy behaviors?
Yeah, so that's a really, really important. So it's my belief, because of the work that I do, and partly because of what we know about biology, that I'd like to suggest to everybody that food is a different behavior than any other behavior. And food is a different behavior. Eating does not belong in the same camp as any other behavior. I'd like to say that really clearly. And that is because eating food is actually really a biological imperative. And so the brain system has really developed so that, food is just so powerful. For instance, the following two substances. So I showed you that sort of limbic system in the midbrain and the frontal lobes, the emotional system. Well, that limbic system, that's where our pleasure centers are. And that's where addictions come from. And the following two substances light up the pleasure centers of the brain equally. And those two substances are sugar and cocaine. And when you compare sugar and cocaine head to head, sugar wins. So, and that's because you see the body is meant for survival. So we then have this drive to eat. So the two things here is first of all, to respect that and to do two things. One is, what is driving your eating behavior? And the reason that I'm making a big deal about food as a special behavior, it's just so darn easy for it to be the reinforcement. It's just so easy to grab a chocolate bar, to look forward to a drink, food is just the easy coping strategy. And for every one of us. So the sort of psychological piece to this would be to say, hang on a second, if you're not happy with what you eat. So I like to say that eating is like a relationship, right? And I actually ask people, what is your relationship with food? And so, for instance, you can all diagnose yourself right now. I'm going to ask you a question. You're going to choose one of two options. Nobody can sit in the fence. So you have to put yourself in one of these two categories. You either eat to live, where food is fuel, or you live to eat, where food is a passion. You can't be on the fence. And now you know where you fit. And so that really tells us that sort of drive. So food is such a powerful phenomenon. What is it that would your relationship with food be? And here's a good relationship. Have you ever been in a relationship where you loved somebody, and she or he didn't love you back? Think about that. That doesn't work. Right? So if you're eating foods and feeling bad about afterwards, that's like being in a bad relationship. You think you love the food, but if it loved you, you would be happy when you ate it. So this gets into all these emotional issues. And if we just kind of reflect and say, food is it's a trap. It's a sand trap. You can fall into it. We all fall into it all the time. Right? And I'd say to you, I don't care what your attitudes towards Twinkies is, but if you had 2 Twinkies a day for 28 days, you would want Twinkies, because you have a brain. So we sort of want to, and I call this replacing the function. So I've got myself in a pattern where I'm turning to food to manage my stress, and I'm not really happy with this. I'm not happy from a diabetes point of view. I'm not happy from a health point of view, but I've fallen into the trap. So what is an alternative function? So if you're managing stress, what are other stress management activities? And the other thing I would strongly encourage you to do is let's eat fast food. But you know what? A bag of carrots is fast food. Fast food does not mean junk food. Fast food means quick food. And a dietitian is a wealth of knowledge. You could spend 5 minutes talking to a dietitian and ask the question, I would like to access some fast food that would be healthy for me. Can you give me 3 or 4 things that I could do? And all you need is a couple of those. So when it comes to fast food, because remember, if all you're trying to do is fuel, fast food means we don't have time, we've got to eat. So we might as well eat good fuel, because then that'll keep our engines functioning well. It's not a meal. It's not you're not going out to a graduation meal. You're not going to a family event meal where you want to enjoy. You want to be like an Italian and take 6 hours to eat the 12 courses, right? If you're going for one of those events, then you want to enjoy your food. But if you're saying, look, I just have to eat, then you might as well just kind of grab something quick, and that meets the needs. So that's how I would respond to that.
That's a great answer, Dr. Vallis. Thank you. And it seems across the board that everybody's received your message very well. And have to agree with carrots being fast food. I can just grab a bag and it's fast, it's food. So on the food topic, Janet, I'm going to jump over to you because I know that you had a question for Dr. Vallis. It might not be about food, but I know that you have celiac, so kind of made me think of you. So the floor is yours.
Let me unmute myself first. So as I mentioned, like I've been diabetic since very young age. So there's a lot of burden put on children, especially growing up, gaining that independence from that transition from parent taking management to now taking care of yourself. And then you add on that extra task of you're swapping to adult care, where quite often the endocrinologists or your team, they're used to seeing type 2 diabetics, or maybe they have some type 1s, not as many that have been diagnosed for so long. How do you bring up the discussions of distress and the burden that has been wearing down on the shoulders for 25 years?
Yeah, that's a really, really great question. I'll make a comment, and it may sound a little strange to you, but I'll explain it. So, do you know that the group of people who tend to get really poor health care are nurses? Do you know that nurses get really poor health care? Now, the question is, why do nurses get really poor health care? Because everybody assumes they know everything and they don't need any support. And so that's the connection back to you. Oh, you've had diabetes. Oh, well, then you're fine. And so it's really about two things. One is that we need a community to try to shift the conversation. People like me are really trying to do that. So I'm actually working on a beginning of an initiative with JDRF, where we're going to try to provide a training program for mental health providers in Canada, and we train them in what they need to know about diabetes so they can stretch into the diabetes field and maybe start promoting asking more questions. I would sort of encourage you to pick your battle, pick your time when you feel most strong, and then prepare a statement and say, I'm really nervous, doc, but there's something I need to say to you, and I'm just going to read it to you. And it might sound like, why haven't you asked me about how diabetes affects my health, my mental health? Again, blame me. Go on and find information from any health professional who's talking about this is important, and kind of bring it in. So I wrote a paper. It's actually the paper that I'm most proud of. I've published quite a few papers over the years, but that doesn't mean anything. But the paper I'm most proud of is a treatment for fear of hypoglycemia. And it's called, hypoglycemia. Fear of hypoglycemia is more of a fear problem than a glycemia problem. We published it with a group of people. I have a few colleagues in Europe. And it's the paper I'm most proud of for the following reason. I've given it to patients and they've given it to their doctors. So the patients have liked the paper. And then they've taken it into their doctors. And then they came back and said to me, this was really helpful because when I gave it to the doctor actually read it and found it kind of helpful. So it's making that kind of shift. I'd also like to make you aware, I have a colleague, her name is Dr. Molly Byrne. And she is equivalent to me. It's a sort of diabetes psychologist. She's from the University of Galway in Ireland. And Molly has led a program called Type 1 Now, and it's a participatory program about empowering young individuals with Type 1 diabetes, trying to navigate this very system that you've described. And there's lots of great stories and lots of great stuff. People on the call, if you want to kind of poke around, that project would be kind of useful. Because it's very much about, really trying to empower the group to not feel that they're kind of, it's almost like in the health system, and we feel like the adult healthcare system makes people feel like we're not interested in you. And so, ways of shifting that, I think, can be really, really important. Did that address your question?
Yes, it did. Thanks so much.
I just want to ask Allie, because I don't know if you have a specific question, but you have a very interesting background, CF and diabetes, but perhaps you can do Dr. Vallis in the audience about your question.
Sure, yeah. First of all, I'd just like to say, Dr. Vallis, thank you so much for every piece of information, everything you've said so far. It's so validating, and there is as a patient, I feel such a huge gap between, your mental wellness and your physical conditions, and you're really bringing it together, and it's incredible. Thank you. And my question, so I do have cystic fibrosis and CF-related diabetes. Cystic fibrosis, for those who don't know, is a lung disorder. I was born with cystic fibrosis, and I was diagnosed with diabetes when I was 14, and the only reason I was diagnosed with diabetes was because of the cystic fibrosis. Growing up, I had an endocrinologist on one side and a CF team on the other, and it wasn't until I was 18 and transitioned to an adult clinic that I had this new CF-related diabetes team. So my understanding is that it's still fairly uncommon, and I'm just wondering if you've ever really come across it before, or how you help patients who deal with such conflicting physical disabilities.
Yeah. Thank you. That's a really important question, and I think my comment is that we actually don't do a really good job. We really kind of fail people in that situation, to be honest. And I think that so what I would say to you, though, because the system doesn't seem to naturally want to put pieces together, so why is the Mayo Clinic so famous? Right? Everybody in the world knows about the Mayo Clinic. Do they have better doctors than at your local hospital or at my hospital? Because they actually don't. So why is the Mayo Clinic such a famous clinic? And I'll tell you why. If you went to the Mayo Clinic, here's what would happen. You'd be seen in the morning. It would be determined all the doctors that you would need to be seen. You'd see those doctors one after the other in the morning. Then in the afternoon, you would have all the tests that you would need. Then tomorrow morning, all of the doctors would get in a room together with all of the tests, and they would invite you in. And as a team, you guys would figure it out. That's why the Mayo Clinic is famous. So I say that to you because what I try to do when I'm involved with individuals like yourself is try to create a team. So I would suggest to you, who's the point person? So who's the person on your team who you feel, and listen to this, who you feel most close to and who has the most power. When you get into the medical system, we all know it is a power-based system. And so you got to have somebody on your side who has sort of more power. So it's usually a physician, but you find sort of a pivot person, and then you work with that person to say, how do you bring everybody together? Because if you have a medical support person, then you can work with that person and team up. And it's like your job is to get everybody in a room at the same time. And I have to tell you, that is incredibly difficult. I find that we work literally, Allie, months to get a full team meeting. But do not give up. The strongest predictor of success is not giving up. And so I would just say, if you had a person because nobody's going to disagree with you. You see, nobody's going to, write on a chart, there's no way this patient deserves to have integrated care. Oh, there's no way that Dr. X has to talk to Dr. Y. That's completely against any approach to clinical management. We all would do that. And so it's just not giving up. And so what happens, we often have, one doc cancels for one meeting, somebody else can't make the next meeting. But after 3 or 4 tries, it happens. And it's worth it. Because then for one patient, yourself, right, it'd be great when you have this kind of combined clinic. It's awesome. But if you don't have the clinic, if you have this sort of ability to create your own team meeting, we only find that you don't have to do that very often before now all of a sudden things are kind of integrated, and that can be really helpful, especially because in the team it'll be a little bit easier for your voice to be heard, because there's all these multiple perspectives. So no one, if there's a respirologist and an endocrinologist and a family doctor and your voice, nobody's going to dominate that, because the family doctor is not going to let the endocrinologist dominate it. So you kind of can use that. So that's what I would suggest to people who are in this situation, where they could advocate for a team meeting. They're very helpful.
So we want to thank you and to you and our panelists this evening, and for sharing your valuable insights and for your personal stories, panelists and alumni. We adore you. We also want to thank Abbott Diabetes Care, who has allowed us to have you here, Dr. Vallis.
It's great to have you on the panel. Thank you so much, guys.